Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. So today what I want to do is take my 2023 Trek Domane SL5 and compare this to an all-out aero race bike. I have here my 2020 Cervelo S3. This is an all-out aero race bike, really built for speed, whereas my Domane is built for comfort. And if you guys have been following my channel for a while, you pretty much know that I recommend the Domane to almost everybody. Where I stop short of recommending the Domane is to people who are doing pure racing. So what I thought it'd be cool to do is actually take my Domane and compare it to a race bike and just see how much speed we are actually sacrificing in order to gain comfort. Now, this is not going to be a scientific test, let me be the first to tell you. So if you really are looking for a test where all the variables are controlled and everything is super measured, this is not the video for you. I don't want to waste your time. This is just going to be a quick and informal test where I compare both of these bikes basically as is. And I just want to see what the performance difference is sort of in a real world scenario. Now, I know these bikes are completely different in their setup. Everything from tires to the geometry, totally different. Especially with this one, I've got all the spacers you can put on this thing. And I also have a stem that is angled 7 degrees upwards. And maybe it looks kind of silly, but it really is a lot more comfortable than those -degree stems with 0 spacers. And I'm all about comfort these days. So this is how I ride this bike. And again, I'm just curious, how much speed am I actually losing if I compare it to a race bike? Now, one of the areas these bikes are different are in the tires. So the Domane is running a 28mm set of tires on both wheels, and these are tubeless, whereas the 2020 S3 from Cervelo is running 25mm clincher tires that are using inner tubes. These are lightweight inner tubes though, so I don't expect there to be a huge difference in rolling resistance, but you never know. So let's take these bikes out for a ride and see what we can come up with as far as speed differences go. So in order to test this out, what I've done is I've set up a 13-mile course, which is about 21 kilometers. And what I'm going to try to do is maintain an average speed of 18 miles per hour, which is 29 kilometers per hour. And basically, I want to see how many watts are required on each bike to maintain that speed. Now, this course has about 550 feet of elevation gain, so it is pretty hilly, but I'm really curious how both of these bikes are going to perform. Now, conventional wisdom will tell me that the Aero race bike is going to be faster, so that's what I'm expecting. How much faster? I'm not sure, so this will be interesting to find out. Before we take them out, let's go weigh them real quick on the scales, just to see if that's going to perhaps play a difference in the performance, and then we'll come right back and hop on. All right, guys, 2020 Cervelo S3 weighing in at 18.14 pounds. 8.3 kilograms. All right, and then the Domane 2023 SL5 Gen 4 weighing in at 19.44 pounds, 8.8 kilograms. So I do expect this bike to be slower in the tests, but let's see what happens. All right, guys, the S3 has the pedals on already, so let's take the S3 out first, and then we'll switch out the pedals on the Domane, take that one out, and let's see what differences we find. Alright guys, so I just got done riding the Cervelo. So what I did now is I took the power meter pedals off the Cervelo and I put them on the Domane. We'll do the same course on the Domane, so stay tuned. Alright guys, just got back from the rides. Now, these results are really interesting. I have it all pulled up on the computer, so let's take a look. Alright guys, so for the first ride, again, S3, 18 miles per hour average speed attempted, ended up getting 18.1, but look at this. So the average power to get 18.1 average speed took 191 watts. Okay, so now let's compare that with the Domane, which, get ready for this. Domane, 18 miles per hour average speed, but guys, check this out. 173 watts average power required to get that speed. That's a 14 watt difference between the Domane and the S3 to pretty much get the same speed. Now, this just was totally bonkers to me. I could not understand why this was the case. Traffic patterns were pretty much the same. Weather was pretty much the same. So I was really confused why the difference was so big. Now the Domane, again, it was outfitted with, as you guys saw, Aero wheels, race tires, and even an Aero handlebar. So it was pretty much set up to look and feel like an Aero race bike. But the main thing is the weight and the geometry. So the weight was about a pound heavier, and the geometry was way more upright. You guys saw that I had pretty much all the spacers you could put on there, plus a positive 7-degree stem. So I was really thinking that was going to slow me down a lot more than it did. So I was left kind of wondering, why was it so much faster? And then it occurred to me, the Domane was using 28mm tires, whereas the S3 was using 25mm tires. Now, in recent years, we have all been told how wider tires produce less rolling resistance, therefore can go faster for the same wattage. So I was thinking, okay, well, maybe it was the 25mm tires on the Aero race bike that were actually slowing it down. So I decided to do the same course again, but this time I put 28mm tires on the S3. And with that setup, what I ended up getting was 18.4 average speed with 177 watts of power. Now that makes a lot more sense to me. So I think what I'm really learning here is that this whole thing about wider tires being faster is actually true. For the longest time, I just did not want to believe that because it didn't make any sense to me, just if you think about it aerodynamically. But I think the rolling resistance claims are actually true, because for 177 watts, which is very close to the 173 watts, I got 0.4 miles per hour average speed more on the S3 than I did on the Domane. But now here's the thing. If I would have taken those spacers off the Domane and changed out the stem so that it was a negative degree stem, I really bet you guys that these two bikes would have been very, very similar in their performance, if not nearly identical. So the whole thing, do you have to purchase an Aero race bike for dedicated racing or dedicated speed if you already have a Domane or really any endurance bike? It seems to me, you guys, like the answer is no. All you really have to do is just swap out some of the components on your endurance bike to be more aero and more racy, like again the Aero wheels, the race tires, and the Aero handlebars. All of that I think will pretty much get you to where most Aero race bikes would get you as far as speed. Now I get it, this test is totally not scientific. As I said from the beginning, a more scientific test would have been to use the exact same wheels and the exact same tires on both bikes, but I just happen to have these bikes in the same location for a couple days at a time, and I thought, while I have them here together in one spot, let me just test them as is really quick and see what differences we find. That's the whole point of this, and I was pretty impressed with the results. Now the other thing too, if you were to scale, this is a 13-mile course, it was a pretty hilly course, but if you were to scale this out to say like a 50-mile or even a 100-mile course, then it's likely the gap in the speed would have been widened even more. And of course, I'm also comparing this Domane to an older generation race bike from 2020. So if I would have taken this up against like an S5 or a Canyon Aero, the differences also may have been widened too. But again, this is supposed to be a quick test just to sort of gauge the differences. And I think with the right setup, you can make that Domane pretty close to being an Aero race bike if you choose to. With that in mind, I really encourage you to check out my full review on the Trek Domane, which you can find here. And in that video, I go into a lot more detail on why I think that bike is one of the best options for most people.